I think hygiene works better without a dentist around. I don't have any association here with a dentist, and people like that because I can be objective about what they need. If I'm feeding patients to a dentist, I can't be objective.
That's Susan Edwards. Miss Edwards is a hygienist who cleans people's teeth at her home in Kingston, Pennsylvania. In fact, she's been doing this for 2.5 years now, much to the dismay of the Pennsylvania Dental Council and Examining Board. Miss Edwards' side of the story?
The problems were my last employer, who forced me out of business, and then there was really nothing else for me to do but open my own office, brought complaint against me from the local dental society, and they in turn brought the complaint before the Pennsylvania Council of Dental Examiners, which is comprised of 9 dentists and one of the dentist's wives who works as a jury clerk. She's a token hygienist. And we go before these boards, and there's no judge or jury. They just walk all over us. My attorney's been trying to get our side of the story on, but since it's so one-sided, we'll have to go to court if anything has to be resolved, if they try to force me out of business.
A 1933 Pennsylvania law similar to that in the other 49 states requires hygienists to work under the supervision of a licensed dentist. Edwards says it smacks of chauvinism.
It has to be obviously something like that because over 99% of the hygienists are women and probably 98% of the dentists are men. So there must be some connection there. The reason for this supervision business was that before hygiene schools and board exams were established, dentists would train women to do the hygiene in the office. And since there was no other gauge of their proficiency, they had supervision by dentists. And when the law was written in 1933, the law was written by dentists. There were not hygienists available to get rid of the stupid. It's stupid. We're regulated and supervised, and you don't need both. The regulation means we have a license. There's no need to be supervised. It's mainly to keep competition out of oral health care delivery, I think.
Edwards sees 2 big problems confronting both consumers and hygienists alike.
There's not free access to hygiene services. If you want to see a dental hygienist, you have to have a dental exam and x-rays, even if you don't want them. And this problem is that if people would have their teeth cleaned more often, they wouldn't need as much dental work. So one of the main problems is to allow the public our services free of dentistry. Another problem is that hygienists, except for a very small number, generate a lot of money and get paid very little of it. In other words, it's just their work that they're selling, and the dentists make a lot of money on their work, and the overhead doesn't warrant such high fees and little pay.
Edwards says it takes a lot of formal schooling and experience to become a competent hygienist, and it just doesn't pay off.
The hygienists get anywhere from $12,000 to $15,000. Some of them get a reasonably good percentage, but they still can't see why they can't own their own business and get the other half of their income. Most hygienists don't have any benefits. They have no insurance. They don't get sick pay. A lot of them, if they are sick, they're fired because jobs are at a premium. It's ridiculous that you would have to work for someone. When you have that type of situation where you're supposed to have to work for someone, they can fix the salaries and the fees. The dentist's income has increased 400% since 1955, and the hygienist has gone backwards, actually. They've lost money.
Miss Edwards' lawyer calls the whole thing a chattel system and says he'll appeal her license revocation, which was ordered several weeks ago, and seek a temporary restraining order to allow her to continue working. Chances are many of Miss Edwards' sister hygienists around the country will be watching this case closely. This is Ted Vygotsky. The Commerce Committees of both the House and the Senate have voted for deep cuts in next year's Amtrak budget. The biggest of the recommended cuts comes in the House, which would give the National Rail Passenger Service only $613 million, and Amtrak says it needs $853 million. This would be a disaster, says Jack Martin, who is president of the National Association of Rail Passengers.
If that happens, Amtrak says they're not going to be able to run any trains outside of the Northeast Corridor. So the rest of the country would be without passenger service by October 1, 1981. It's our guess that the rest of the country wouldn't support the Northeast Corridor in 1982, and the train would be gone all over the country in another year.
Martin says his group isn't just pro-train, but really for a balanced transportation grid for the whole country.
The bus has its advantages for short distances, probably distances up to 200 to 300 miles. Beyond that, the comfort begins to be a matter that concerns a lot of people. The plane is certainly the preferred mode for the majority of long-distance travelers, although the train has done extremely well in bringing people back to the rails since Amtrak has had its new equipment. But there's an area in there that is variously described between 105 or 600 miles where the train is, good trains are probably going to be about as fast in elapsed total transportation time, much more economical than the airplane, and certainly much more comfortable than the bus. The airlines today, with their fuel cost problems and with their other cost increases, are rapidly pricing themselves to the point where the average person cannot afford to fly.
But can the train pay its own way?
The Congress in 1979 said that they wanted Amtrak by 1985 to get 50% of its cost out of the fare box. Amtrak has said that in 1982, which is well ahead of the schedule, 3 years ahead of the schedule, they're going to get 50% out of the fare box. That's a very significant improvement. Now, the train does get a subsidy, and that's what it's called. It's called a subsidy. But when we put money into airports, air traffic control systems, those things are called investments. When we build highways, those are called investments. I don't understand why when we put money in the highways, if that's an investment, putting money in the railroads is not an investment. I don't understand why if we put money in the railroads and that's called a subsidy, when we put money in the airlines, it's not called a subsidy. I think we have to get the same language to address the same kind of situation. If you look at the total investment the government has made over the years, it's little wonder that people prefer the automobile and the airplane. They have had all sorts, billions and billions and billions of dollars of support every year for the last 40 to 50 on the highways, and certainly for the last 25 to 30 for the airlines.
So what should we do? Martin has this advice.
If Americans believe, as all the polls have shown, that we need a balanced transportation system and that we need energy-efficient rail passenger transportation, that's what they need to tell their congressmen and their senators. They need to, if they've ridden the train, that's all the better. If they think they may be riding it, that's all the better. If we had a nationwide network, there's no doubt that millions and millions and millions more would be riding the train. But those people who feel we need that kind of system simply need to express their own desires. It is important to write. The Congress is receptive. Interestingly, when the Senate Commerce Committee voted, there was a note in the New York Times that said that the attitude in the committee reflected a nervousness over pressure from the constituency. They're just simply, they're doing policy by budget as opposed to policy issues. And we need to get people to get the Congress to focus on policy as well as budget. I want to see the budget cut like anybody else, but I think it's unfair to cut Amtrak 40%, cut the highways about 5%, and cut the airlines almost nothing. If you cut the highways 2% more, you could give Amtrak exactly what it has and what it's asked for this year.
This is Ted Vygotsky.